You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 179. On today's show, we discuss various financial independence topics for people working in the creative industry. We talk about improving financial IQ, the starving artist narrative, and empowering confidence in personal financial decisions. Before we start, Happy New Year! This is our first episode of 2025, and it was actually recorded back in 2024, just a month ago. Now, this is the second of 4 live recordings we did at LDI. And thank you to everybody who joined us in the room. There's something about that energy of people coming together that just makes it really fun. You know, like going to see a live theater show. There's just something about being there, being present, tuning everything else out. It just makes it awesome. So thank you to everyone. You can find links to everybody's info in the show notes or at artisticfinance.com/179. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. We're recording this December 9th, 2024, and we are live at Live Design International in Las Vegas. I am Ethan Steimel, a lighting designer recently based out of St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm host of Artistic Finance, which is a weekly podcast where I interview people in the creative industry about how they handle the finance and business side of their career, and we have conversations like the one that we're going to have today. Now, connected to that, a disclaimer that we are entertainment professionals, not financial professionals. So before making any decisions of your own, consult a financial professional. And then I will say that this is a very laid back session. So if at any point you have questions or you want clarification, just raise your hand and you can ask them anytime, or you can save them to the end. But don't do that too much because we always run out of time. All right. Now, Amy D Lux here is the one who has spearheaded this whole session. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, I'm Amy D Lux. I am a lighting systems design consultant and account rep at Kinetic Lighting. And I do a lot of community service because I just realized that it's important for us to come together. And I spend way too much time in my career, so I might as well bring my community service over here. So some of the things that I do are involved with Women in Lighting. I'm on the board of the Women in Lighting and Design membership. I'm also with Erica in the recently released book of Women in Lighting, Collective Light 3. I also work a lot in diversity and inclusion initiatives, and I am the founder of the Golden Ghostlight Runners. We had our 1-year anniversary at the LDI 5K this year. We are up to 32 runners. Wow. If you're a runner or you know a runner that's in the industry, we'd love to have you. We're raising money directly for Behind the Scenes, which is a foundation in our industry to help people that are ill or injured and unable to work. We give them grants. So we also have a lot of mental wellness initiatives there as well. Financial independence is another thing that I strongly believe in. I think that when I kind of discovered it for myself, much later in life, I realized that it's actually not as mystical as a lot of people are taught. And there's some really basic principles that we can learn. But as creatives, there is, the artist myth, the starving artist myth, where a lot of us think, well, if I work in a creative industry, then I can't get paid. And that's not true. You can get paid, you can thrive, and you can learn how to manage your money. So that's kind of what we just want to have an open discussion about. Again, none of us are financial professionals. We're just sharing our own stories. And you don't have to be professional either. You don't have to be a pro. You don't have to be rich to get into this conversation. We're just having conversations about money and creativity. So again, we encourage you to ask questions throughout. We also have a ton of resources online. Ethan and I have been collaborating for a few years now. I started the Financial Independence Club around the same time that Ethan started Artistic Finance, and then we discovered each other, and it's been amazing ever since. So without further ado, I'd love to let our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start down with Erica Hayes there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica D. Hayes. I am a lighting designer, director, and programmer based out of Los Angeles. I'm a member of IATSE 728 and have been touring for a little over 17 years. I do a lot of TV shows, commercials, music videos, things of that nature, in addition to touring with artists like the Isley Brothers, Anita Baker, Fantasia, or anybody with a budget, really.
Yeah, I'm Matt Guminski. I'm a lighting production designer. I started in theater and quickly discovered that it's not a great place to have sustainability financially. So from there, I moved into concert touring, cruise ships, architainment, fashion shows. Basically, using my theater background, it kind of gave me the eye. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I apologize. It gave me the eye to kind of work in all aspects of lighting. So when a tour is not happening, I can actually find work doing something else. I'm also a proud member of USA 829, the designers union. And yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Mills. I'm lighting designer, lighting programmer based out of Orlando, Florida. Also a partner in the design firm of Touchlight and Media. Over the last 20 years or so, I've done lots of international touring with large acts and have recently transitioned over to the corporate side of things. So I'm now in ballrooms instead of big arenas every day.
It was like home for you.
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We have such a great group of panelists, and I can't wait to hear how this conversation goes today. So again, we were talking about really wanting to break the idea that the starving artist myth. So Matt, if you want to start and we'll kind of just work down the line, let's just have an open conversation. Your thoughts on the myth of the starving artist, or is it a myth? Is it real? What do you think about it?
Well, with the starving artist thing, I never really looked at myself or, us as artists. When I think artists, I think of, the painter that, never sells a painting until he dies or something like that. So, but, we're certainly in the artistic industry and, there's money to be made and, there's different levels, pay different rates and whatnot. And, you just kind of have to seek out what you're good at, what your talent is, and try to get what your rate should be or what you're worth or what you feel you're worth.
I mean, I think knowing your worth is definitely the most important thing. Like when I graduated from college, I just kind of went straight into design. I sent my resume to every theater I could find, even if I was not supposed to be at that, even if I definitely didn't have the experience. And I worked a lot, I think, at my height, I think I worked doing like out of 52 weeks, I want to say I designed probably 30 to 35 productions, which if you know theater, I was basically either drafting a light plot, reading a script, or in a theater doing tech. And that was just like, there was no healthy take a break. It was just work and grind. And my design fees would be anything from $500 to I think the creme de la creme for me was I designed at the University of Maine in Orono. My design fee was $2,200. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But, knowing the time commitments that you did to that, it was just I needed to make a choice about health and find a way to not work myself down. I lived in Boston at the time. So I started working at, music venues, working as a house lighting designer. So when I didn't have to take that show that's like, you're going to spend 5 weeks on this project, but we're only paying you $500. That made no sense to me. It's kind of like what, $1 an hour, like something like that. It's like, you have enough to buy your food. And it just wasn't healthy for me. But at that point, yes, I was a starving. I would say, yes, I was a starving artist.
It's interesting that you say that because, it takes money to make money. And a lot of times we want to build this amazing career and we're like, I have to do this gig to put it on my resume so that the next person will hire me. And then you feel like you have to take that $500 gig for 5 weeks just because it's this name production that can get you the next gig. And then you're broke for a while. But then you start thinking about, investing in your career, taking classes, that takes money. Even taking these gigs take money. I mean, paying to park, to go to work in Los Angeles, and then you have a 1-hour walk away. So then you have to go and buy your own food and stuff for this 14-hour day that you might wait 2 weeks to get paid from, or 30 days to get paid from, or 45 days to get paid from. And then so you have to wait all this time for this check, for this gig that you invested money in. So, I mean, the starving artist concept, especially if you're just starting out, it's a real thing. But to get out of it, I think you have to change your clientele. And it's like a catch-22 because how do I change my clientele if I don't even have a clientele? how did I change that in my career? Doing that work and then learning that not all work is good work. Not all money is good money and not all gigs are good gigs. And then you learn that, okay, I don't want to take that $500 5-week gig anymore. And saying no. Learning to say no has actually made me more money than saying yes to everything.
That is a similar thing that happened to me kind of when there was a specific period where I kind of switched tiers in the way I got paid. Was taking a little bit of a break and because I was burnout.
Yeah.
And I, didn't really know what direction I was going to go after that. But I had a lot of steady clients and I think my day rate was like $250 or $300 around that time. I didn't really want to go back to work yet. I just bought a house. And so it was really risky because I didn't even know where my money was going to come from. But I had 2 months before I had to actually pay my first mortgage payment. So I had this little period to kind of figure things out. And then I started getting these calls and, it was, maybe it was someone that I worked with before that it wasn't a great experience or I didn't have great personnel. And because I just needed a break, I actually did say no. I never knew how to say no before that. And then finally somebody called and I didn't know how to say no, and I didn't realize that I was actually doing a strategy, but I gave them double my rate. And I was like, yeah, my day rate's $600. And they're like, okay. And then I was like, what? And then not only was my rate higher, but the personnel was great. The crew was great. The gear wasn't falling apart. And all of a sudden I realized that there actually is, like you said, not all gigs are good gigs. Not all money is good money. There's actually stuff out there that is worth your time and where you're going to be recognized for your value. And so if you can really kind of, figure out what your value is, not be afraid to ask for it. Negotiating's hard for a lot of people, but the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. But the worst thing that's ever happened to me when I've negotiated or, tried to counter is that they might say no, but they say, but we can give you this. It's always a little higher than they started because every business is going to have a cushion. They're not going to give you the most money they have, and what are your thoughts about negotiating?
Oh, that's hard. It's the same thing, right? It's knowing your worth, exactly what you said. And I always hate when, I get a phone call from somebody and they say, oh, how much, what's your rate? Like that is almost to me, it's like,
what's the gig?
Yeah. What
am
what's
I doing?
The gig? What am I doing? What is the extent of this? I almost like to put it back in their hands and say, well, what's your budget allow? Or if it's something that I'm really like, all right, you've just given me the pitch, I'm really into it. I like to kind of put, let's work with each other because this sounds like a fun project. So I always kind of dance around that because I don't want to say, my day rate is $750 or my day rate is $1,000 or whatever, because I don't want to scare them away. Or at least that's the way I used to think. Now I'm just kind of like, it's $1,000. I live in New York City, so day rates are exponentially higher because cost of living is so much more. For me to say like, now I won't, blank, I'll be like $1,000. And they, sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say we can only pay $850. And it's like, okay, well, $850 is better than no $850.
Now, do you guys have a number, 2 numbers, a top number and a bottom number? Like you're not going below this. You're not leaving your house for less than this rate. And a top number, like this is what I would love to get or things of that nature.
I wouldn't necessarily say I have a top number.
Okay.
The number can be as high as I think I can squeeze out of them. But there's certainly a low number to where the gig just isn't worth it anymore.
Yeah.
And but then there's also a bit of, okay, this gig sounds really cool. You have no budget, but damn, I'd really like to do this because it's cool and I got the time. It looks fun. And, I'm also one of those that if I'm not doing anything for 2 weeks, then I'll maybe take a lesser paying gig just because I've done all the things I needed to do around the house I need to get caught up on. And, but then on the other side of that, I also don't want other clients knowing that, well, Matt just went out and did this gig for X amount of dollars and he's charging us this much. So it's definitely a game to play. And this can be tricky.
That's the other thing is I generally don't like to discuss my rates. I just, with anybody, it's my negotiation is my negotiation.
Yeah.
Just because it's exactly what you said. Like if I do a friend a favor, I don't want that getting out because then they're going to say exactly that. So I like that kind of negotiation. When I'm on tour, I never talk to people about money. We always know what the per diem is, right? You always know what you're going to get for that, but it's never what the rate is. That should never be discussed, in my opinion.
I actually have kind of a funny gig that I do that, it pays me. I think they gave me a raise not too long ago. It's $17 an hour. It's House of Blues, which technically
it should be Orlando.
I've been on the books there since 1997. That's when I first moved to Orlando. And since then, I've gotten married, have kids and all that. And working at House of Blues on Disney property gets you a Disney main gate pass, which gets you and your family and friends and all that into the theme parks instead of having to buy $1,000 annual passes for each member of the family.
Huh.
So there's the perk.
But yeah,
that was going to be my next question for you, because I'm salary now. My own company is just more passive stuff, but mostly I'm salary. And then, but you all have your own design firm, entity, kind of solopreneur, mostly, I think. Is that something that you consider? Like, obviously you do in that case, but are there other opportunities to negotiate perks in when maybe the day rate or the hourly or whatever is not quite as good?
Well, for corporate shows, the budgets are typically higher. I always negotiate in a hotel room, even if it is in Orlando, where I'm 30 minutes away from the gig, because we may have these crazy 6 a.m. calls, and trying to drive into a ballroom at 6 a.m. in Orlando sucks. And the client just pushes it back on the end client anyway. Oh yeah, we need a block of this many rooms. So it's not even noticeable to them. So it's started asking for that. And
parking.
Well, it was years before I realized. I just assumed that parking was, cost of doing business. And then I realized, wait, I can push this back on production. Okay.
Right. Touche.
Yeah. Well, that, and I don't know what it's like in LA, but working in Orlando, you get to know all the parking areas and all the ballrooms and all that, all the hotels, and you learn typically whatever the in-house AV, whether it be Encore or PSAV or whatever. As you're pulling up to that gate to get out, you hit the button and say, "Hey, I just finished a load in for PSAV," and 95% of the time they just open that arm and don't even tell you.
Well, it's funny. All of the Encore / PSAV venues that I work in LA charge us $5, but it's not the $25 or the $50.
Oh, yeah, Orlando's like $40.
Yeah, it's so crazy. But
well, it's actually like in New York Fashion Week, it's down in Tribeca, right? And I live in Queens, Astoria, Queens. And if you take a subway, it's an hour, right? And you're doing like days or like 6 a.m. to midnight, and you don't have that 8-hour turnaround. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to do is get on a subway at midnight. Sure. So then I was like, oh, well, Ubers, taxis, right? One-way Ubers and taxis are like $45, $50. And I am one of the people, having moved to New York from a place outside, I have a car. So then I was like, oh, let's start like looking at like what the parking situation is. Parking is like $35. So I was like, I would rather drive there and drive back, and it's still going to be cheaper than an Uber. And it's the convenience that I actually get an extra hour of sleep, as opposed to waking up, at 4 a.m. to walk to a subway, take a subway.
So do you eat that cost?
Yeah, I read it. I mean, it uses write-off, right? Okay. For our business. That's just kind of, I
guess even if you don't like turn it back in as, part of your invoice, that's a really good point, is to make sure that you're, especially freelancers, really need to keep good track of all of your expenses, because that's going to make a huge difference in your taxes. Mm-hmm. Do you use CPAs or do you all file your own?
Absolutely. I have a CPA. It was a life-changing situation going from Gusto / QuickBooks to somebody else just handling it. And then the perks that I got was free education. Well, no, it's not free because I'm paying them, but they're educating me on, the proper documents that I need to keep, the proper way to invoice my clients and, things of that nature, and the tax deductions that I can get from various things. And then helping me not claim too much as well, because you also want to, show that your business is growing, this, that, and the other, and not always in the red or this, that, and the other.
I was actually fortunate. My CPA, he is a actor and has toured. While he acts, on occasion, he's a member of Equity. He will do CPA work. It's kind of his passion and love. And he actually got a gig working for Intuit. So he's big into the QuickBooks. He's like one of the guys that, when you go on QuickBooks and like the high level accounts that you're like, hey, I need help. And he'll pop up on the screen and like,
oh, that's a real person.
That's a real person. Yeah. It's crazy. But he actually knows Intuit and QuickBooks, like all the little intricacies of it. So he's set up rules and all these tasks. So I don't even necessarily need to keep receipts. I do keep receipts. I'm like a pack rat with that stuff. But it actually is already behind the scenes to putting it into its own category.
Because you're using your bank account to...
I'm using the credit cards, bank accounts, all that stuff. It's all linked into QuickBooks, right? So the rules that he has set up, it's like meals and entertainment. It just knows. Yeah.
And I can just export this information to my CPA and pretty much the job is done.
Yeah. And at that point, I just go, and it makes actually it, because there's very little work for him to do. He just needs to reconcile all that stuff at the end. I pay him quarterly to just kind of reconcile so he's not spending hours doing it at tax time. But then it makes my tax, like, he charges me like $500. You know, he's like, I do this for so many people and it's such an easy system now. He's like, $500. And I was like, you kidding me? Okay. Thank you.
How do you handle yours?
I completely cheated the system. I married an accountant.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So did you always feel like you knew how to take these steps, or, did you ever feel like you needed to? I don't feel like we have a lot of general financial IQ. We don't really learn it in school. So like, when did you kind of figure out what you needed to optimize your business and your finances?
Previous to me getting married to my wife, I did have an accountant before that, but once, she came along and everything, my other accountant was quickly fired. Not fired, but let go. But yeah, as soon as we got together and everything, and she kind of started seeing what I was doing and the money I was bringing in and the things I was not doing properly, she kind of got me all squared away as a S corp and this, that, and the other thing. And I only use certain cards for certain things, and it's all organized, and it's a good system. And
were you both born just with like a high financial IQ, or?
No, but my father, he had a CPA that I inherited when I went to college. My father taught me a lot of things that I need to, keep these receipts or keep this, keep that, and the other. So I kind of had I don't want to say a leg up in that aspect, but at least somebody that I could talk to growing up that could help me with certain things. I mean, I started my first savings account in like second grade, so it was just, that was interesting in that aspect.
My parents were both freelancers. My mom was a real estate agent and she worked as a nurse. And then she was like, oh, I want to spend more time with my child. So I'm going to go into real estate, which is equally spend just as much time. So I don't know what she was thinking, but she did that. My dad was a headhunter for, medical companies, finding CEOs and stuff like that. And they were always like, whatever money you get, put a little away. There's no reason why you shouldn't set up an IRA. Because I think right now IRAs the maximum contribution is $7,000, which doesn't seem like a lot. But I did the math and it's like $135 a week over 52 weeks. That gets you pretty close to your $7,000. And that compounded over time. If you just keep doing that, you're going to have $1 million like by the time you retire. And it's not that much. And you could use that $7,000 and deduct it on your taxes.
I learned really late. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think when I was like in my late 30s or something like that. I grew up really poor and didn't have a lot of resources. And somebody gave me the advice when I first learned about an IRA. At that time, I think it was like $3,500 to contribute or something. And I was nowhere near making enough money to save that yet. Yeah. And somebody told me, you gotta max out your IRA. And so at the end of every year for like 3 years in a row, I was like, you can't max it out. So I didn't contribute at all. And, that is something that you don't have to max it out, right?
You don't have to max it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's great if you can. But I think a lot of people that don't have, a lot of information or a lot of, high financial IQ or maybe are still learning, it's good to know that there's resources and there's ways to optimize your finances and compounding and investing. But don't listen to the first person like I did that tells you, like, you have to do it a certain way. Because I lost out a few years of compounding interest for that. Yeah. Any other investing strategies you use?
I've done really well with real estate. It's just been dumb luck, but like I bought whenever the market was low, just because, I need a new house. I'm going to go get this house. This works out. Then I've got a family. So now, I need to get a bigger house in a better school district. And, hey, look, we can still afford that house too and use it as a rental property. And now basically my rental property pays for the house that we live in now. And it's kind of covering itself. So it's kind of nice.
It's like house hacking.
Yeah. It's just dumb luck that I was, happened to buy right place, right time. Yeah.
What people are afraid of is not the future. Like, where's the next gig coming from? But I don't have property. I don't own property, but I've always squirreled away money. Right. So like generally the rule is as a freelancer, when you get a check, taxes aren't taken out because it's just it's a design fee or whatever. I take 20% and I put it into a high interest savings account and I let it sit there. And I accrue, I don't know, 4.5%, whatever, over the course. And then when taxes come, I have a squirrel, like kind of a safety jar of money that I can use to pay my taxes. And if I, at that point, don't use all that money, I'll just take it and roll it into, like, I have a Vanguard, retirement. Like, I've set all that up that money isn't going to waste. It's either I'm going to use this to pay off a credit card, or I'm going to use this to squirrel away to my long-term investment.
I play with crypto. I love Bitcoin and XRP, and I know it sounds crazy, but it's been working for me.
I dabble with it as well, but not too crazy.
Yeah,
it's definitely fun. And
I mean, I'm kind of using it as a savings account, so to speak. I mean, really, really high interest savings account.
It still freaks me out a little bit because it just seems like something that could just be erased off a server. Then all of a sudden your money's gone.
What's really funny is I have a friend who bought into Dogecoin.
Oh yeah,
like
now we have a department of Doge.
I don't know whatever. But he bought in when it was like 0.00038 cents, like something ridiculous, and he put in like $40. When it went up at its peak, he cashed out and he walked away with like $80,000 or something like that. Something ridiculous on a $35 investment. Meanwhile, this is my luck with crypto. Meanwhile, I was like, oh, it's like 4 cents, 5 cents, maybe 6 cents. Oh, Elon's going on SNL. This thing is going to go to the moon. So I buy like $200 worth, and of course it tanks. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to sell this right now. I'm just going to hopefully get my money back. And it's only $200, but it's still like, it's the pride. I don't want to lose money ever in my investments. So
you only lose when you cash out.
Exactly. It doesn't hurt to hold.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another thing. I own AMC stocks.
Okay, I'm with you. I am with you.
So we're going to see what happens. To the moon on that.
Yes,
too.
to the moon.
So I had the similar kind of thing with Matt where I'm just like, okay, I believe in groupthink. Like we're all like, okay, this is a thing we're all going to stand behind. And I think that's the power of crypto is that people kind of taken it into their own hands. And so it has developed some kind of value. The tricky thing for me is I'm like, but where is the value measured? And, like Matt said, if it might just go away one day. And so I've always been really trepidatious about it. So how I got involved in crypto a little back end was when Coinbase went public. I was like, well, I can buy Coinbase in the real stock market because it is it's measurable. It's a business. It has assets. It has people. It has equipment. And so I bought Coinbase, and we've talked about this on our 6K podcast on artistic finance because I bought it. I was so excited about it. I was like, because I usually do index funds. I don't buy individual stocks.
Copy.
And I said, but this is going to be my in. And I'm going to buy a real stock. So and I knew somebody, they didn't tell me anything because that's illegal. She was like, I can't tell you anything, but she worked for Coinbase. She's like, but as you know, we're going public soon. And so we're really excited about it. And I was like, I am too. So I went like the day that it sold and I bought it. And I think I bought it for $333 a share. And I just bought 3 shares. I bought $1,000. I was like, okay, this is like the highest kind of gambling I've ever done. And then it tanked just within a couple of weeks.
Generally public offerings.
Right.
It will always drop.
Right. And that's what I learned that time because don't ever buy it the day of. But I was so excited. But similarly, like you said, Matt, I was like, I'm not going to sell it right now because it's the values. I'm going to lose money. If I sell it, then I've instantly lost money. So I just let it sit there. It's not as high as it used to be, but it's actually closer now. It's actually a little higher. So to the moon.
To the moon. The thing is, it's exactly what Erica said. It's like you don't lose money until you sell. And it doesn't cost you anything to hold. Long term, if you look at charts, unless there's like predatory short selling or anything going on like that, with AMC, maybe, possibly, who knows? It doesn't hurt you to hold on to it. Who knows? That could be your long-term investment because that one day that it goes to $300, $500 a share and you sell it, you could have a good chunk of retirement.
But don't use the money you really need.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't
if you need that money
into the
back,
stock
put it in a
market.
high yield savings or put it in something liquid where you can get to it if you need it, but really allocate.
That was always the thing. And I didn't get into the stock market until the pandemic because we had nothing else to do. And I literally can't just sit around and do nothing. So I started doing research on the stock market. And I think that's when retail investing became kind of like a real thing because people were starting to get money from the government. They were squirreling that money away, but they had a little bit extra. You couldn't go out to movies. You couldn't go out to do anything. So there was a lot of extra cash. So people started, you see these apps pop up like Robinhood, Webull. It's like speed dating for online dating for the stock market now. It made it a little more accessible. And this was my success story. I started to do Peloton. I bought a fake Peloton bike and used the app, but I looked at the stock and it was like $2 a share or something. I was not paying $1,000 for a bike. I'm sorry. I went on Amazon. I got a Peloton or whatever you want to call it.
Peloton.
Fake Peloton. But I bought in, it was like $2 a share. When I ended up selling it, it was $120 a share. And I sold right at the peak, because at that point it's just like the pandemic was starting to wind down and it just kind of dropped precipitously. And then I took that money and I actually invested in other stocks. And there were some bad choices. There were some good choices. But right now I've kind of consolidated my portfolio to, I have my retirement through Vanguard. And then I have my AMC stock, because to the moon.
Okay.
One of the things I noticed about the crypto a little while ago, I didn't really take it too seriously. Like I said, it's like server could go down and all your money could go away. That's kind of my mindset of it. But the majority of the corporate shows I do are for large financial firms, like the Big Four and all that. For like the last 5 or 6 years or so, there's always been a big meeting with their people about crypto and how to handle it and what's the trend that's coming and, how to better invest in it and how to, manage your clients that are investing in it. So it's definitely a real thing.
It's real, and it's becoming easily accessible. I mean, you have a Cash App that you can take Bitcoin in now. I mean, they're starting to adapt it into more and more things, to the point where the banks are going to have to incorporate transferring Bitcoin and transferring XRP or whatever. I mean, sending a wire transfer overseas right now is the most chaotic situation.
6 days.
It makes no sense when, we have these new technologies that allow us to do it instantly or within a couple of seconds. And I understand, the server could go down, but it's not really, the blockchain is not a server, but it sounds like it, if you don't really dig deep into it. But I generally keep my crypto on a ledger, basically like a flash drive or whatever. And it's like my personal bank account in my pocket. And when there's a run on the banks or there's some situation where you can't get your money from, the banks and things of that nature, I always have my flash drive.
So we've got some crypto. We've got some high yield savings accounts. We've got IRAs. Do we have any 401ks? What other kind of assets do we have?
I have an old 401k that my wife rolled over into Roth or whatever.
So one thing I learned really late, because I was a freelancer for a long time, I always thought you had to have a job at a company to have a 401k. And it turns out you don't. There's a couple different versions of them. So there's some self-directed 401ks and things like that. And, depending again, how much you're making, if you want to max out these different things. So the other one is HSA. I wanted to ask about, does anybody have an HSA?
Is that the health account?
Yeah.
Okay, copy that. I feel like it's offered through our local, but I just haven't dug into it.
So the IRA, the 401k, and the HSA in the U.S., I know not everyone's from the U.S. here, but those three are the tax advantage accounts. So whatever you put in there is tax-free. Those are the way to kind of leverage that way at the end of the year when you're doing your taxes. If you've put money into those, that amount gets deducted from what you owe on taxes from your income. So the HSA one is interesting because this one, I don't know of another way to get it except through a high deductible health plan, an HDHP. So if you have a high deductible health plan, those are typically eligible to be paired with an HSA. Then you can get an HSA account and you can max that out. HSA is $3,500 a year right now. The way that works is that you can put that money in there, whatever amount. Again, you don't have to max it out, but whatever you can. And at any time, forever, you can pull funds out to pay at the pharmacy, at the doctor. So if you're using it for a health expense, you can pull it out at any time. If you want to pull it out without any penalties, then you wait for a non-health related expense, then you can pull it out after retirement. I think 60 or 65, the penalties get removed. And then you no longer actually have to use it for a health expense. You can use it for anything. So it actually does the same compounding, and you can allocate which index funds you're allocating to it, just like an IRA or a 401k. But that way if you don't have any health expenses that year, you just leave the money in there. It keeps on compounding. And so that's another kind of way to leverage compounding interest and saving money on your taxes.
So now with the HSA, does that put you in a position to be able to negotiate with the doctors? If you hear these stories of people saying, "Oh, I need to get my broken arm fixed or whatever," or are you going to use insurance? No, actually, what could we do if I paid cash for this? And I've heard of people getting better rates that way. Does that put you in a position to do that with the HSA, or are there rules around it where you can't necessarily do that?
I mean, if you pull it out to pay for a health expense, there's no penalties. I don't know how to negotiate rates. I've also heard about this. I know it's very complicated. There's companies that will help you with that as well. As long as you're using it for a health related expense of any sort, then there's no penalty at all.
Generally, like when you are investing, like in your 401k or IRA, it's the plan is, and the plan never always goes the right way, but the plan is you never touch that money. That is your nest egg for the future, because when you I don't want to be on the tour bus as much as I love touring, and I don't want to be on the tour bus at 65, 70 years old. Like, I think I might die. So like being able to know that, I've been contributing, and it really is not like in the grand scheme of things. Like if you do the $7,000 IRA thing, right, $135 a week, like to me back then sounded like, oh, that's so much money. That's money I could use on gas or food or whatever. But you know what? Don't go to Starbucks. Like take a couple of days, make your own coffee, like do whatever you need to do. Like bring your lunch from home. Like you'll see that you can get that $135 really damn quick.
No more avocado toast is what you're saying?
Well, I mean, you can make it at home.
Make your own. We have avocados at home.
It's just in the long run, the older you get, and this is like, the kid side of me would be like, you're ridiculous. But the older you get, the faster time goes. Like when you're a kid, like when you're in middle school and you're just like, the school year is never going to end, right? Now I'm 43 years old and I'm like, holy crap, 2024 is over already. Like it just flies by. I don't feel like I'm 43, but it's, age is a very real thing.
And I don't think you have to be like 100% killjoy, never have coffee or avocado toast or anything. But really what it comes down to is actually what I think the place to start is with your budget. Because I know when I first started, I opened up a mint.com, which isn't even around anymore. But I just started putting on, and I always thought that I was frugal because I grew up super poor. And so I never had money to spend for the longest time. I just thought that I was frugal. But what I was buying a lot of inexpensive things, and it was adding up, and I just wasn't realizing it. So I didn't realize how much money I was wasting until I kind of put it really all into this data sheet and I was like, there's no way I spent that much on groceries. There's no way I spent that much out at a restaurant. I don't even like shopping. How did I spend so much on clothes? Like I was dumbfounded. I had no idea. I was completely ignorant of what my spending was. And so once I started to dial that in, I was paycheck to paycheck. I didn't think I had any money to spare to save for these things. And when I realized it, the way that I was able to over time become successful with my budget is to really get real about what my values were and what I was buying to keep up with the Joneses and what I was buying to keep look cool or whatever, and really get in touch with no, like I would rather, what's my I would rather travel. I mean, obviously I'd rather have a comfortable retirement, but like in the here and now, I have a budget for travel. I have a budget for gifting and charity. I have budgets for things that really make a difference to me, and sitting down and figuring out what that value is for you so that you can stop all the extraneous spending. Then all of a sudden, all these pennies start adding up and you're like, oh, I do have enough money to contribute to an IRA. And then every year it's a little bit more, and you get better and better at it. So
writing that budget is how I get to my day rate. When I figure out the numbers, okay, how much does it cost for me to live? How much is my car note, insurance, this, that, and the other, divided by the amount of days that I'm willing to work. Because I used to do it by 30, and I don't want to work 30 days anymore. I don't want to work 7 days a week, even though I've done that. And I feel like I had to do that in order to whatever. But figuring out that number of how much I need to make to live is how I come up with my day rate. And then taking that and figuring out, okay, from this day rate, this is going to this crypto, This is going to this coin. This is going here, here, and here. So I like the way you put that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And also another thing that people don't think about is they just subscribe to things on their phone.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, that
Like
adds up.
subscription this.
Mhm.
And then you forget about it, right? Because
Yeah.
you have it linked to like, say, your Apple Card or whatever. And it's just like, you get the emails and you're just like, oh yeah, it's like a $2.99. And then you start adding all that up.
What kills me is Apple charges me and it just says Apple $2.99, Apple $5.99. Like, what was that expense? So I can cancel it.
Well, I have it sent to email, so I actually know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, even like when it comes down to like streaming services, right?
Mhm.
Do you really need like HBO Plus or whatever, HBO
17
Max?
different channels.
Like at first, like you were like, oh yeah, I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this, and then when do you have the time to actually watch all those things?
Mhm.
Netflix is like $14.99 a month or something like that. That's $200 and something a year.
Yeah, and if you add up all of your subscriptions, and next thing you know, you're like $500 or $800 in a subscription.
And it's crazy because we started doing these subscriptions because of cable. We wanted to get away from cable. We thought
Which was expensive.
We're thinking, oh, okay, well now I'm gonna spend $2.99 instead of $80, and then okay, $2.99 plus $4.99 plus
It all adds up.
$14,
So it's
and then they go up in price every year too. They're like, they send you an email, we're going up $2, and then all of a sudden you're $14.99 for something that you did a free subscription for 2 weeks.
I will say I'm not sponsored, but when Mint.com went no more, I switched over to Rocket Money, and they actually have a feature where it'll review your subscriptions and it'll cancel for you. So it'll tell you, let's review your subscriptions. Do you really want these? Instead of having to be like, okay, because they've made it really hard to even cancel a lot of them, right? So instead of going like, which one is this and how do I find how to contact them? They'll just go through and do it for you, whichever ones you tell it to.
We have that too, and it is great.
Yeah.
They purposely make it difficult to cancel subscriptions and gym memberships and everything. It's a scam.
I have an update about the HSA because I Googled it. So there's ways to get money out of the HSA account. There's various ways, which you could just transfer to your bank account, which then you would have cash. Or you can just sign up for a debit card, which would sort of be cash too. Or you can just write a check. You can get a check for your HSA and write that to the provider. So I think if whatever you can negotiate with your provider, if you say, if I just pay this in a lump sum or something like that, I think whatever you can negotiate, you can certainly get reimbursed from your HSA or just pay directly.
Yeah, I have a debit card. And so I just use that whenever I have to pay for any service. It has a Visa emblem on it. So I use that. And then any ones that have gone through before I had the card, I would just, you can submit, or if I forgot to bring my card with me and I paid some other way, you just submit it into the portal and then it deducts it from you.
Oh, that's nice.
So, again, we all have kind of different backgrounds. Is there anything that you would say was like maybe like one of your worst financial mistakes or something you wish you had done differently or knew different?
For me, and I think everybody says this when they eventually get a house, whatever. I wish I would have got a house a lot sooner, just because you're paying rent and then you're getting nothing out of it except a place to stay until you can't pay rent anymore. Then they kick you out. But having a house and getting it as soon as you can is a great thing. Just because they're not making any more real estate. So it's
Something that parents would say. They're making any more land.
yeah.
For me, I would say the same thing. Even though I don't necessarily think I'm in a place living in New York City, like I think any property you buy in New York City is like $1 million. It feels like in Astoria,
Same with
Queens.
LA.
Yeah, it's like Astoria, Queens. These rundown 2-story homes it's beautiful, right? But they're still like $2.6 million, and they look like it's just because of the land. But they look awful, and then you're like, after I spend that much money, then I got to renovate it, and it's just a whole thing. But I would say what Matt said, yes. The other would be investing sooner, or like at least putting money into retirement, even if it isn't maxing it out, but taking $50, $100, and just throwing it in there. It sounds like pennies, but over time that adds up.
And breaking the cycle of whenever you get a raise or start earning more money, saying, "Oh, now I can afford this as well." Try to stay living,
Below your means.
Yes.
This was a little trick actually that I did. So when I bought my car, they offered me this thing where you could pay bi-monthly. So the first payment, it would be your full thing, but they would just take half of your payment and it would apply to the principal or the interest.
Yeah.
Then the second payment would go directly to the principal. And I set that up to just automatically withdraw, didn't think about it. And then once my car got paid off, I just kept that going. So what it's doing is because I was like, for 5 years that I was paying this car off, I was having this money taken out. Why stop that? So at this point now, what it's doing is it's just going into my high yield savings account. So I'm saving without thinking about it. So that's another thing that you can try.
That's an interesting question. I think that hanging out with better people, being around people you guys have better conversations. You're talking about investing. You're hanging out and not gossiping about people. You're talking about crypto or something, getting some friends or some colleagues that have those types of interests. What does it say? Birds of a feather flock together, or, you're like the people that you hang around. If you hang around a bunch of broke people, you're going to be the fifth one, or I don't know all those sayings, but, just hang around with some better people, and it's easy to get education from them. It's easy to talk shop over drinks, and you guys are already talking about the same things that you guys like and stuff like that versus gossiping or talking about the latest Netflix show or whatever.
I think that's a really good point because there's a lot of circles where talking about money is totally taboo or it's like shaming. I had a friend who was inspired by my openness about talking about finance. And, for me, the reason I started to is because I did grow up broke. And when I kind of started learning some stuff, I was like, why don't other people know this? Like, this isn't rocket science. This is something anybody could do. Things like high yield savings accounts and stuff like that. And she was so afraid when she would try to bring up anything around money. A lot of her other friends they would call her names, or they'd tell her she was greedy, or, like stigmas that just aren't true. I kind of believed in a lot of stigmas around money is greedy and convenience is the enemy and kind of stuff like this. With Rich Dad Poor Dad, that was kind of what opened my eyes, that whatever environment we grow up in is kind of the things that you believe. And so depending on the environment you grew up in around money, you might have certain ideas about what it means. And so I kind of did believe in all of these things where money meant greed. And so I did stay broke for a long time, kind of like on purpose, because I thought if I didn't, then I wasn't authentic and I wasn't a good person. I was specifically living in a house when I was, I think I was like mid-20s, and I had 2 roommates, and we were all anarchists, and we wouldn't turn the heat on because, that would be paying the man. And, in Austin, Texas, so it's not like it's that cold. I mean, I can't get away with this in some places. But, we were just like, we're not going to pay the man. He's making enough money off oil. And, I'm sitting there one day, and I'm like we had a freeze, we had a cold snap, and I'm like under every single blanket. And so I couldn't get out of bed. And so my nose would get cold, and then I'd go under and warm up my nose, but it'd be hard to breathe, and I'd come back out. And I'm like doing this. And I was like, you know what? The man is fine. I am not fine. And I couldn't go out and like help a cause right now to save my life. I'm not helping anybody else. I was like, I need to be okay so that I can actually do all the things I believe in the world, And so I decided right that day in that bed that I was going to change my relationship with money, and I was going to do it, and I was going to keep my ethics, and I was not going to become a bad person or a greedy person. And then all of a sudden, like you said, then I started meeting people who had a different mindset about money, who also weren't greedy, who were very philanthropic, and it was fine, And now I get to share that information. But you're right. It starts with the community.
I'm going to tell you, the man was still getting paid no matter.
Exactly.
It's just like, just be warm, be comfortable.
Yeah, definitely didn't notice that you guys had your heat off.
Yeah. I don't think they
Did
really
not affect
cared.
his bottom line whatsoever.
Yeah, like that one house. That one anarchist house.
That Big Brother was not paying attention.
Yeah.
Yep, I realized it that day.
You mentioned like starting early. That seems to be a trend, like starting early. How old were each of you when you first started investing? So whether that was an IRA or buying some sort of stock or property or something, like what age were you when you first did that?
I actually was pretty late. I started my first thing was real estate too. I bought my first house in 2016 and I house hacked it. I bought a 4-bedroom. I had 3 people living there. So I did not pay the mortgage basically. I did pay for repairs and things, but I house hacked the first house, and then I had an opportunity to move out of state for a project. And so I did that, and then I rented the house out completely. Never went back. It became a rental. I got full-time renters in there. So that was, became my first passive income. So that was 2016. How long ago was that?
8 years.
8 years. So yeah, I was 41.
Okay.
I'd say probably around 35 when I first started getting serious about it. Got a house. I had a small 401k from a previous employer that was like automatically set up whenever you pass your 90 days there or whatever. But wasn't much in it whatsoever. And I'd probably say around 30, 33, 35 is whenever. I'm 53 now, so been a little while. But yeah, I wish I would have did it sooner.
I think my IRAs I did like mid to late 20s because my mom was like, you need an IRA, especially if this is what you're going to do. But when my dad passed away, there was a little, after we sold the property and everything, after all the bills were paid, there was a little chunk of money. The two most responsible things I did. One, paid off my student loans, which, by the way, really interesting when you call them and say, I want to pay off your student loans. And they actually like, congratulations. It's like, they're happy. I was like, I thought you would be sad that I wasn't giving you $5,000 a month or whatever it is. And then I took the rest of that and I started a Vanguard account, like a retirement 2050 fund. And that's it. I wasn't going to touch that money. I have friends that took their parents', inheritance and blew it on cars, TVs, dumbest stuff.
When you said that when you called them and their response, I thought they were going to say, you don't have to do that. You can pay the minimum because that's what they do on your credit card. If you ever look at your credit card balance, because I actually pay my credit cards in full every month, but a lot of times I'll pay it like twice a month. So I'll just get in at a random time, be like, oh, let me just clear this. And so whenever I go to make a payment, I also have them on automatic payment. But when I go to make an extra payment, I go to the screen where it's like the review screen. It's like, you don't have a payment due right now. It's like, because they want that interest.
Yeah, I love when Amex says that to me. I'm like, nope, I want my points. I have a much different relationship with money than a lot of you guys have spoken about. I'm from Detroit. I was born and raised a hustler. So I started buying candy and selling it. I started investing in those types of things at a very young age. I was in elementary school selling candy and getting kicked out of school because they didn't want me doing that. Fridays, we used to have pizza day. I would go to the local Pizza Hut or Domino's and buy pizza because my pizza was better than what they had at the school. And I would sell slices and I would take that money and put it in my savings. I'd go to Sam's Club, buy a bunch of candy and stuff like that. And then as I got older, that translated into me buying equipment, buying cameras, buying DJ equipment, renting out that stuff, buying a lighting console. Some lighting consoles cost just as much as houses these days. It's crazy. I did just see the new Hog and it's affordable. I'm excited about it, but it's also a good investment because I can, buy that, rent it out to clients and, make rental income and things of that nature.
I actually did that. I bought a Hog fly rig and it cost me like 10 grand. The reason I did it was because it was a European tour. It was a lot of festivals and sourcing a console at every festival is a pain. Bring your own. And I bought it. 10 grand with the case, everything all good. And I actually billed it back to the bands. Like I would be like, if we're not going to rent this, you're renting an audio console, you're renting backline, rent my lighting console. And by the end of the summer, I paid the console off and then I got a free console out. So it's like, it's how do you do that hustle?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did something similar early on with Catalyst media servers.
Ooh.
And then those were really, really good for me for a while. And then when I got a call to do what was supposed to be the final tour of Motley Crue.
The fifth final.
Yeah. They said, oh, yeah, it's going to be 19 months. And I immediately said, oh, can I rent you my 2 consoles? And they go, yeah, we got to get them from somewhere. So as soon as I got off the phone with them, I called up a friendly lighting vendor and said, hey, you do a lease to own on 2 MA2 lights.
Very nice.
For 18 months.
So you already had the contract.
So, it was already a done deal. So yeah, it was great.
Lease to own. I don't know if I realized that was an option for consoles.
If you're friendly with,
sure.
you can make some side hustle go.
Yeah. And then, once the MA3 came along, I offloaded those and rolled that into Follow Me.
Oh, I love that. It's interesting that you would rent your console out to your bands because a lot of times when I present them that idea, they're like, oh, well, you are getting a check from us. We don't want to pay you another one. So I have to sub-rent my console through companies like Kinetic or something like that. So, they don't feel as bad paying this LD even more money.
See, now what is that about, right? Like, what's the psychology about that, right?
That and you're probably giving them a better rate with your console.
Yeah.
Because now it's going to get in a middleman rate on top.
Yeah.
Yep. There is that markup.
It has to be the markup. That's the cost of doing business.
For me, I sell it as, you're going to be spending $1,000 a week on a console, or you can rent mine for $750. What do you want to do? Generally, like, oh yeah, we'll just rent yours.
Yeah, but somewhere in an office somewhere, somebody's sitting going, "Why are we paying this LD this much money?"
Right.
So that's where a lot of it comes from.
Then do you want to work for that person?
And see, that's the thing. Back to not all gigs are good gigs.
Yeah,
not all
true.
clients are good clients. But if they're willing to pay somebody for it and I can still get it, I'm gonna at least try.
So I think I understood that middleman thing, but just to clarify, so you have a console that you do end up renting to them, but you have to go through Kinetic. So
Yep. So especially if I have a floor package or a lighting rig that I'm renting from the vendor anyway, then it's easy for me to say, "Hey, Dina, can you add this to the invoice and send me a check afterwards?"
I do the same thing with the Follow Me systems. Because this year I got called out a lot to come do a show, and they wanted me to be there to set it up and everything because they didn't fully understand it, and they rented it from me as well. And I go, okay, who am I billing on this? They go, oh, let us put you in touch with a lighting vendor. We just add it to their bill.
Yeah.
But then at that point, then would it fall under their insurance?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you don't even need to worry about that. That's pretty awesome.
But I still have insurance because not every gig allows for that. But yeah. Do you guys have any questions or, how are you guys feeling about this? Are we going over your head? There we go.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on investing in precious metals, and then also if you had any thoughts about leveraging credit. So for instance, you know you have to spend so much money to move somewhere, but you don't currently have that money. So you put it on a credit card and then you roll it over to 0% interest for a few months to pay it off. And then you roll it over again to pay it off without paying the interest.
I love using credit more than debit because airline miles, one, and points for hotels, and we travel a lot, and it's just very easy to get free flights and free hotels when you do that type of thing. But I think that's a good idea. What are you guys working on?
Let's use LDI as an example, right? I'm American Airlines, and I have the city executive, whatever. I had just paid that off. And then I was like, oh, I got to book my trip to LDI. And then it's like, put the hotel on it, put the flight on it. And I was like, oh man, I just had it at 0. And now but it's, yes, I don't do what you do about the 0 interest. I just, at that point, I'm like, if I'm doing what Amy does, I'll do, $1,000. And then, a couple weeks later, another $1,000. I am carrying a little bit of a balance, but as long as I'm paying double, usually the interest doesn't really fall. I just want the points. I want the loyalty points. I want the upgrades. If I'm going to be on a plane, I want to be first class, or I want to get upgraded to first class. I'm traveling far too much. So I generally try to put it, and the only time I use my debit card is to take out cash from the bank. I had a friend who they got scammed. Like somebody was at an ATM and they put one of those readers on it.
Skimmer or whatever.
Skimmer. And from that moment on, it's like, absolutely not. I don't want that. So always use credit cards, because if there's ever an issue, you can dispute it. And you're running on a line of credit. You're actually not touching your cash, what you're actually worth. So that's 2 cents. I also, to answer your question about precious metals, I don't invest.
Let's do that one after. Let's finish this topic. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. As far as the rolling over to a 0% interest rate credit card, that's helpful. Like if you get in a situation whenever, okay, you've had a couple down months and your credit card's been racking up a little bit and you want to pay that off, then that's pretty helpful. But yeah, like everybody's saying here, the perks of having a good credit card is pretty great. I'm taking my family to Europe for Christmas to do all the Christmas markets, and I didn't pay for the flights.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I do credit cards too for the points and all of that. But that's where a lot of people do get themselves in trouble, because if you're going to use that strategy, you really do need to pay in full, because what they're getting you is on the interest of the balance. So you have to really be responsible and understand your budget and understand your profit and loss in order to do that strategy. I have used the 0% interest 3 times. That I did it to get my floors redone. I got a brand new 0% credit card, got my floors redone. I had 18 months to pay it off. And then I paid it in full before the interest kicked in. I did it again when I bought a vehicle, got another new credit card that also had 18-month period. So I didn't pay it. I paid the minimum for a while. And then I increased the payments like over the period so that by the time the 18 months was, I paid my car off in full. And then I just did it recently again. I got a new roof on my house and got a 0% credit card and will have that paid off before that period expires. So I do like that strategy. Again, it's about really understanding your bigger picture and your financial map. And as long as you're really paying attention, because they're going to, if you do that and then you get to where that 12-month or that 18-month period is over and you are not able to pay it off, then you've got a really big balance that you're going to get interest rates on. So
Yeah, because it's usually what, 29 for it's usually something.
It's going to jump up to like 22% or something like that.
For like the whole amount.
Let me ask you, when you did that, you got 3 credit. I hate and I know your credit is affected by how many credit cards you have open and whatever. To me, that's crazy did you close them?
It's crazy if you don't know the timeline. So this is a period of over like 7 years. So it's not like I got them all in the same year.
Sure.
I use it strategically when it's the right time. I don't always do that.
Do you keep them open?
I do, because your credit is measured by the part of the measurement is the age of your overall credit. And when I paid off my school loans, it was one of the only things that I had in credit. And my credit rate dropped dramatically because it closed that account and it looked like I didn't have any credit history. It brought me from having a 12-year credit history to now that account is closed. And so it doesn't count of the age of your credit anymore. And so, if you are going to use that strategy, it's also about timing. So I don't always keep every credit card open, but typically my credit age history is old enough now that it doesn't really matter if I leave it open or not. It does also show that I have a higher credit balance. And if you want to take out a mortgage or some kind of loan, they look at your credit rate. What's the word? Score. They look at your credit score, but they also look at your debt to credit ratio. So if I have all these credit cards are still open, and so I have $100,000 worth of credit, I don't put balance on them. So my only balances are my mortgages. So, my debt is much lower than my credit percentage. As long as that number, I think it's under 30%, but I keep mine under 10% at all times. That's the kind of stuff that they do look at if you're looking for getting loans and things like that.
But to that point, my wife and I, we had a credit card. Well, she had one that was open from college, and it was one that her parents had helped her open up, and we just had it. And we tried to close it over the course of 12 years. We had tried to close it 3 times, and we called the bank because we were living out of state. We had moved to New York, anyway. And they had said, well, it's going to dip your credit or whatever. So we're like, oh, you know what? We won't. We'll just keep it open, right? And then it happened a couple years later. We were just I don't think it was getting a fee racking up or anything. We weren't using the card. And so we did it again. And then we actually went to the bank once we were in town and we were like, hey, we want to close this. And they talked us out of it again. Anyway, so this is so I'm just keeping it open because I'm I don't want it to ruin my credit, right?
Yeah.
They keep telling me it's going to ruin my credit. So finally I did some Googling and I had a podcast and I thought I should be a little more responsible, right? I did all the research and I went to the bank and they tried to talk us out of closing it. And we were like, no, we are growing. We are 30 years old.
I am putting my foot down.
Exactly. So we closed it and credit card hit, dropped. But 10 points. Yeah. And then it was a month. It was 30 days. It was literally nothing. So all I'm saying is if anybody's out there has this card open forever, just hanging over you because you don't want your credit to drop, just close it. And take a tiny ding.
So it's the older ones are the ones that you typically do want to keep open because they show that you've had a history. The newer ones, you can close them all day and that's fine. But to your point, usually if there is going to be a credit drop, it's usually brief. If you are someone that's trying to build your credit though, if you already currently have no credit or have a low credit score, then you may want to keep it open until you have a history and you have better credit score. But if you have a long-standing, good credit for a long time, then it's not really going to make a dent.
I'm currently hooking up my son right now. He's 16 years old and just recently started driving, and I put him on one of my credit cards to start building credit history, and he just uses it for gas for his car.
Nice.
So if anybody has kids, something to think about. Helps them out.
You put a limit on that?
It's the same limit that's on
Yeah,
insurance cards.
like,
So yeah.
Okay, how about precious metals? We know how Matt feels. Not
It's
really
not
into
opinion,
it.
I just
Haven't gotten
I
into
don't
it.
have I live in New York City. I have no room for a safe. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't as well.
Yeah.
My dad was really into it, and whenever he passed, I inherited all his stuff and took his coin collection to a place in town, and they gave me a fair price for it, at least what I felt. And at the time, gold was really high as well, so I just cashed it out. I mean, I don't really know much about it, but obviously anything that has value like that, is something to invest in. And, just like any other thing, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. For instance, like if gold's really high right now and tomorrow they find some new huge, load of gold in some mountain while they're digging, then gold's going to go back down because there's a lot of it available.
Yeah, I don't currently invest in precious metals, but I'm interested and I've looked into it a lot. And I guess it's just kind of one of those things I don't really prioritize. But the US dollar is no longer backed by gold and hasn't been for a long time. And so having something like that, I think there is a place in the world where if the ish hit the fan, then, it might actually, it's a tangible thing. With the current economy and the way inflation has been, like with just generally with goods, prices don't seem to go down even when we have a lot of something these days.
That's corporate. That's great.
Yeah. But I mean, so I probably will at some point invest in precious metals, and you actually don't need a safe. There are institutions that they will store it for you as well. What I learned when I was looking into it, I've only started looking into it over like the last couple of years, so I don't know a ton about it. I would invest in gold before I'd invest in crypto besides my Coinbase, just because I understand a physical thing more than I understand how blockchain works. If there was a time where I understand it, maybe Eric and I are going to go have coffee and teach me all about crypto. If I understood it better, I might feel more comfortable with that. But like just where I am right now, I would feel more comfortable probably with precious metals. But I'm really more into index funds and real estate, but more into index funds.
I have some thoughts on precious metals. I don't invest in precious metals, but I have looked into it, and I've decided because you can buy a gold ETF index fund, but I've decided that is still like paper and going through middlemen or something. So if the stock market crashes, even if you have a stock in gold, like I think it's still going to be infected or could be impacted by a financial crash. So I sort of think like, well, investing in a precious metal that way is no different than investing in a stock. I do think buying a bar of gold or jewelry, I think that's like, you can't mess with that. That's like buying property. It's like you have it. It isn't affected by inflation and all that. So I would feel comfortable. I don't do that, but I would feel like if I were to invest in gold, I feel like that's how I would do it. I also probably wouldn't go through a middleman, like the places that store it and say, oh, we'll store your gold in a vault, because that's still just a middleman. And to me, it's like, well, if you're going to do the gold, why trust that vault is not going to declare bankruptcy and then all your, like, I mean, I guess if I had like $3 million worth that I was going to invest in gold, I would sort of be forced to do that because I couldn't buy that much bars. I don't know how big the bars are.
The safety deposit box, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I've decided that like the only way I would invest in precious metals would be like getting the actual thing, but I also just don't want the hassle. And I also see Bitcoin specifically, not cryptos, but Bitcoin. I've done a whole episode on it, and I've read the white paper, and I know Matt keeps saying, well, a server could get deleted and your Bitcoin's gone. The blockchain doesn't really work like that. So it would be very, very like nearly impossible for that to happen. And so like if I had my bar of gold and I was on a boat with it, I could drop it into the ocean and it would go away. And I feel like there's just as much likelihood of that happening than crypto. So I see crypto or Bitcoin specifically as like a commodity. And so I think I would go into Bitcoin just because it's easier than doing precious metals, if that makes sense. Yes.
So in London right now, the gentleman has lost $500,000 in Bitcoin because his wife accidentally threw away the portable hard drive.
Yep.
And the discussion going on right now, which they said would never happen, is they may have found a way to hack his account to get his $500,000.
I don't like that.
So he likes it a lot.
I know. Sure. I feel it, but there's two sides to that. On the other side of that, my husband has a ledger and he can't find his keys to it. And I'm like, we need to sell this XRP right now. But then, a couple days later, it just kept going up. So I'm like, all right, maybe we'll just hold. But yeah, losing that flash drive or that hard drive with the money in it is a risk, and that's why people like the banks, because you can't really lose the bank. But somebody could also go into your bank account and steal your funds that way too. So, there's insurance, but there's no insurance on crypto. But yeah, that's sucky.
But I have been following that story, and he actually told his wife to throw it away. So she did technically throw it away, but he's not mad at her because he did tell her, "Hey, can you throw
He
that
just
old
didn't
laptop?"
know that it was his.
He just wasn't thinking.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. Anyway.
Hi. I have a question about HSAs. How do you acquire one? How do you obtain one? Do you have to have a health plan? Can it be separate? Do you have to have a health plan with a job to get it offered?
I have those exact same questions.
Great. So you do have to have a health plan, and you have to have a high deductible health plan specifically. So you will pay a higher deductible depending on, what kind of choices you make with your health insurance. That may or may not work for everybody. I got my first HSA through a company, but then after I was on my own, I was able to, I'm pretty sure, and we need to fact check this, even if you are working for yourself and not under a company, that if you purchase a high deductible health plan still, that you can have an HSA. Either way, whether you're working for someone or working for yourself, you have to have the HSA paired with a high deductible health plan. And then tell me again the other part.
What is considered a high deductible health plan? So is it labeled that way?
Yeah.
If I go to look for like healthcare.gov or something, would it have high deductible health plan?
Yeah, and that's specifically the phrase. So you also see as HDHP.
HDHP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if you don't have an employer and you need to get a specific HSA account, there's a couple of different ones. There's like Health Unity and Optum. Like there's brands. I had a period where I didn't have a high deductible health plan. I didn't have to get rid of my HSA, but I wasn't allowed to contribute to it. So you have to have you can have the HSA, but you have to have the HDHP in order to contribute
to it. So you can't have an HSA and contribute to it. It has to be with a high deductible.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be clear.
This sounds like a good topic for a completely separate podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm glad that we're clarifying. I'm fact checking. You are accurate, totally accurate. And you can get a high deductible health plan through healthcare.gov. If you go in that way, if that's how you're getting your healthcare, you can. I thought you had to have an employer.
Yeah, with most of these tax advantaged accounts, you don't. And that's, like I said, with the 401k too, like I always thought you had to have a company that you worked for, but there's a couple of different versions and you don't. You can set up your own. Anyone else have a question or comments? Let me throw a question back to the audience. How many people have some kind of investment, whether it's real estate, crypto? Most people, most of the room, it looks like. I'm a little bit curious, how many people have an investment in real estate? How many people have and keep your hand up if you have more than one. How many people also have an investment in the stock market of some sort? Retirement accounts?
Do we raise our hands?
Are we allowed
to? Yeah, just kind of wanted to get a feel for the room.
All right, so that's our panel. It's awesome. Thank you all for taking time off the show floor to be here. And thank you all for discussing these things quite frankly and quite openly. I really enjoyed sort of the meandering topics that we covered, and you all just did it very frankly. So thank you. Amy, thank you for instigating this and making it happen. And if you want to hear more discussions like the one we've had today, obviously you can check out the Artistic Finance Podcast, wherever podcasts are sold. We discuss a lot today with this HSA and all these. I do pretty good show notes, and I put links to everything that we discussed. And I'll do that for this episode too. I'll have this all in the show notes, and I'll have links to all your contact information and everything there. So thank you for sharing your time, your energy, your expertise on this, even though none of us are financial professionals, especially because we talked about crypto a lot today.
I know. I wasn't expecting that. Ethan and I both are not really.
Blame it.
Yes. Disruptor over here.
I will say I did an episode on Bitcoin, and some of the feedback was, this was your worst episode ever. Why did you discuss this?
We'll have to have a separate one with Erica on that one.
And I'll just throw in this thing, which is Roth. Like I always on this podcast 1,000 times, I've said, hey, if you don't know what you're doing with finances, you should open up a Roth IRA, because it's just like one of the best ways you can do it, which it just changes the tax incentive. So you pay the tax now, but when retirement, you don't when you pull that money away, which is just different than a traditional. Anyway, 401ks have a Roth option, but not all providers. Like if you're going to look to open one up, whether individually or through your employer, there is a Roth option. Almost every, like Fidelity, they all have this option. So if you look into Roth and you think, oh, I like the tax advantages of that, and then you go to sign up for your 401k and you don't see that option, just do a little bit of digging because they're available. So that's just something that if you leave this and you're going to open up something like that, look into the Roth option.
And I will say that I've known Ethan long enough that I knew him before he had a son, and he had a son who I think is a year and a half, 2 years,
20 months, year and a half. Yeah.
20 months, year and a half. And he loves Roth IRA so much that he named his son Roth IRA.
That is hilarious.
It's true.
That's a nickname. That's not his actual name.
Okay.
Oh, it's not on the birth certificate.
Theo Roth IRA stuff.
Like, you know, your dad runs a finance.
I really
podcast.
did try for a long time to get him to name his son IRA. I was on it,
No.
but I lost that battle. So I just call him Roth IRA now.
He will answer to it.
Yes, he will.
Yeah.
Yes, he will be well trained, and he will probably be the youngest kid to have a Roth IRA.
I got to get him employed.
Another episode.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's just a downward spiral right now.
All right, so he's going to get employed soon, and then we'll be on our way.
yeah, if anybody wants to hire my son for anything, virtually, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
What
28
what
months,
could a
right?
28 month.
he could pet
Kid.
cats, I bet.
He looks cute.
He looks cute. He
Yeah.
giggles.
He can pull your hair. Okay. All right.
perfect.
I don't know where we've gone. Okay. So what was I going to say? I'm saying we're done. Could we give these people a round of applause? Because I just really enjoyed this. Yeah. And thank you. You guys have been amazing. And so have you.
Thanks
So
for having us.
thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
That's
you.
it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great show.
That's it for this week's episode. My takeaways are just quotes that stuck with me. I don't necessarily have anything to say about them other than I took note. So Matt Guminski said theater wasn't sustainable, so he moved on. Erica D. Hayes, I have made more money by saying no. And I got to say, ain't that the truth? That really is. It's hard to say no sometimes, but it's liberating. It's the only real power you have. And frankly, you have to say no to things that aren't paying you because you have to make money. Matt Guminski, negotiating is hard. I hate it when people ask what my rate is. My response is, what's your budget allow? Amy D Lux, I tried doubling my day rate and it worked. Now, the worst is that they can say no, but they tend to always come back with something more. Matt Mills, I don't have a top number, but there is a low number that doesn't make the gig worth it. But if I do take a gig for below market rate, I don't want people hearing about it because those are just one-offs. Matt Guminski, I don't discuss my rates with anyone. Everyone knows per diem rates and expenditures like that, but my rate is personal because if I do a favor for somebody, I don't want that getting out. Now, I wish we could have talked about that a little bit more because I suspect Matt would discuss rates with other people if you, say, reach out to him and say, hey, what's a good rate for this type of work or something like that. But it does also illustrate that point. People don't talk about money. People don't want to talk about money. It's this thing. And I think that's part of why we're having these conversations is because we need to be able to talk about it. Matt Guminski said, I eat the cost of parking. I'm glad Matt said that because depending on the gig, yeah, sometimes we do eat those costs. And like he's saying, it is a tax write-off. That being said, could you just ask for reimbursement of parking or things like that? I think you definitely could, but it's a lot of legwork. And is it worth it? Is it worth the relationship? So I just appreciate Matt saying that. And on those gigs Matt is talking about, it's probably not a low-paying theater gig where every penny costs. Because actually the show that I just did right now, I had them add into my contract a rider that said they would reimburse me $100 of parking. And the reason for that is that I drove to the theater and parking was $15 a day. The fee, I'll just be honest here, was $1,480. I was getting paid $1,480 to light the show. Like that was my fee. And that's not, for the amount of time you're putting in and effort, that's not a huge fee. And so me needing to pay $100 to pay in the slot during tech and all that, I wasn't okay with it. So I reached out and I'm not going to say they were reluctant to give me that, but That was definitely the vibe I was getting, that I was being inconvenient, but it was just real. It's like I wasn't planning to spend $15. So long and short of this is that I appreciate Matt saying that, because yeah, depending on the gig, it is sometimes easier to just eat that $15 a day, or it's the cost of doing business, but you can write it off, and you can also do the legwork to have somebody else pay for it. Just depends. Erica D. Hayes said that she used Gusto and QuickBooks and then switched to an accountant, and that has been an education for them about what documents they need. Matt Guminski, $135 a week can max out your IRA, and that can get you to $1 million by retirement. Now, I didn't fact check that, but I certainly believe it. And that's something we've said on this show 1,000 times. Open up a Roth IRA. That's the number one easy thing that you can do for your retirement. Social Security is not a significant amount, and a Roth IRA is something that is for you and only you. You control your own destiny with that. It's not a pension that's out of your control. It's not a 401k that's half out of your control. It's something that you can control. So I love that Matt said that. Again, if you don't have a Roth IRA, open one up, put $135 a week in, start now, do it. Matt Mills, I've done well with real estate. My first house is now a rental and pays the mortgage on the current house. That's awesome. Matt Guminski, I've always been good at squirreling away money, 20% going into a high yield savings account. And then at some point that goes into the market. I just love that. I love that. Matt Guminski for the win here. And finally, Erica D. Hayes, I love investing and playing with crypto. And I just love that we had this discussion because these aren't things that we always talk about. So talking about crypto, investing, all that, I love it. All right. So thank you to the panel. That was amazing. Thank you, Amy, for organizing that. And of course, a big thank you to Ellen at LDI for inviting us to have this session. Now, if you are enjoying this conversation and you would like to help me keep them happening, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/artisticfinance. Your support there goes directly toward keeping this podcast alive and growing. And most importantly, in this moment, it retroactively helps me pay for my trip to LDI. Okay, and now you might think that this episode is over, but I feel like talking for a minute just because it's January 13th and already this year has seemed to have a lot going on, or at least has been funny. So first off, right now, I am super happy. I'm in a great mood, not just because the holidays were fun, but because tomorrow, Nicole and I and Theo are going on vacation. And I have to tell you, I love nothing more than just unplugging from the world and spending time with Nicole, with Theo, and relaxing. Now, Theo is 21 months old almost. So we're going to see how this flight goes. It's about 4 hours. So now we're in St. Louis now. And the only direct international flights from us are Mexico, Canada, and randomly Frankfurt, Germany. So we, of course, picked the shortest and the warmest. So we're going to Cancun. So we're going to be spending time on the beach. And you might think that doesn't sound fun with a toddler, but I'm telling you, it's going to be amazing because we're going to wake up, we're going to have breakfast, we're going to hit the pool or the beach, we're going to have lunch, we're going to take a nap, we're going to hit the pool or the beach, we're going to have dinner, and then we're going to do the bath time routine and then bed. But when Theo goes to bed, we can go sit on the balcony and have a cocktail. So it's going to be so good. I'm really excited. Plus, we got Theo these little sandals, and then my sister got him a little pool floaty. And okay, I'm just so excited. Anyway, not to mention, I just opened a show, and when I open a show, it tends to be we take vacation like the next day. Just because, I mean, that's how it works, right? You open the show, the work on it is done, and then you have some time before you have to do the next one. So anyway, that show, Chicken and Biscuits, is at the Black Rep in St. Louis. I think it runs to the end of January. So this is the first theater gig I've done in town since we moved to St. Louis. And I went to the opening last night, and the only designers there were me and the set designer, which is fine. But the director also wasn't there. So the sound designer wasn't there, the director wasn't there, the costume designer wasn't there, the prop designer wasn't there. And it sort of came to a realization when at the end they have a step and repeat, and the production manager was like, "Hey, can I get a picture of all the designers?" And it was just me and the set designer. Anyway, I'm just sharing this because is this what openings are like? In my lifetime, I have notoriously been someone to skip opening because it's sort of like, you receive a fee. The fee in all my history has not been a significant fee necessarily. And so it's like, I don't get paid more to go to opening. And so I know that sounds crass and rude. And, what about the art and the passion, all that, whatever. Just the reality is that I often don't go to opening because I don't want to take that, 5-6 hour chunk of my life. Anyway, but this time I was like, first time I've worked with this group, want to show face, want to do a good thing. And then I show up and nobody else was there. It's just funny. Okay. Another weird thing that was about this show, and I mentioned earlier that I got paid $14.80 for the gig. And that's fine. That's fine. Like, that's what I was able to negotiate. And by able to negotiate, I mean, they didn't budge at all, which is fine. That's their prerogative. But my problem with this is, and it was a wonderful experience. The design team and the director, very easy to work with, wonderful, really enjoyed it. The stage manager was incredible. The house crew was amazing. So it's a good experience, and they have it really streamlined. So I didn't have to put in more time than I needed. So there were a lot of positives about this. But one weird thing is that I am not an academic. Now, I might have fooled you because I did that 1 year visiting assistant professor at ASU, at Arizona State University. So I might have fooled you into thinking I'm an academic, but that was a year and I'm no longer an academic. Sound designer, a teacher, the director, a professor, set designer, a professor, costume designer, a professor, the stage manager, a teacher. So everybody was an academic. It's fine. It's just, is $14.80 for doing a show, a livable wage, or even beyond that? I'm using livable because I think that's the appropriate term here. Thriving doesn't come into the picture. It's a livable. So it's just an observation, because this isn't the first time that this has happened to me, where it just feels wrong to be doing it. It feels like you can only be doing this job if you have another job that's paying your bills. And that's just the way it is. And I'm just saying it out loud because it's just that weird situation when you realize, oh, I'm the only one here that I guess is doing this for the paycheck. Like everybody else is doing this for their professional experience, in addition to their day job, or for their day job to go back and say, oh, this is the professional work I'm doing. I hate that situation. I hate this moment where we're working for not a lot of money. And this is a choice, right? I've made this choice to do this. And I've made a choice to stay in St. Louis. I'm trying not to travel a lot because I want to spend as much time with Theo as I can for a while he's young. It's just that realization that, is this a hobby? Like, is this a hobby? Everyone else here is doing it for a hobby, it seems like. And here I am doing it. So it's just a weird experience and the weird feeling. And I just don't know if anybody else can relate or wants to relate. So anyway, that is what it is. Just a strange, I don't like that feeling. I don't like being the one, because it's like, are you crazy? Like, are you crazy? Like, we all have a day job and we're doing this as like our side gig. This doesn't pay enough to be a full-time. And there's a lot of privilege involved, because like Nicole's working full-time. Nicole's the breadwinner, and I'm able to do this, but I just don't like the feeling. It doesn't feel right. But I also have to say that the house crew, so they have a technical director and assistant technical director, and they were incredible. They were really good. They were on top of all their stuff, made my job really easy. They're very clear about what we can do, what we can't do. And I was a little worried going in, because the Black Rep, the theater they use is the Edison Theater, and that's on the campus of Washington University. And it's a really nice campus, but it is a campus nonetheless. But it's a roadhouse. And so the crew was actually really good, not academic at all, totally on top of their stuff. They were fast, they were efficient, and super pleasant to work with. So both from design and creative team was awesome, but also the house crew was super cool. All right. So now another thing that's happening, which is a professor at Rockford University who was at ASU when I was there, has asked me to come talk to their class about sort of the business side of things, especially for designers and technicians. And so talking about unions and all that. So I'm going to be going and doing just a 1-day visiting lecture there. But the professor also said, oh, and I'm trying to pair all my design students up with, lighting designers and costume designers and stage managers. And I need a set designer and a lighting designer. Do you know people like, could you, or do you know other designers that would be willing to spend half an hour with these students and talk to them about the business and all that, or just the industry and being a designer? And so I was so happy at the Edison Theater with the house crew. So one of them is a lighting designer and sound designer. And I said, hey, would you talk with one of these students? And they said, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like there was no hesitation. They were like, oh, I would love to do that. And then I called John Lee Beatty, who he's been on this show before, and we have a good relationship. I've archived all of his photos and sketches. I called him and I said, hey, would you be willing to do this? And again, no hesitation. He was like, yes, absolutely. Be happy to, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sharing this just because it makes me so happy when people you work with, your colleagues, are willing to do that, willing to meet with students, because, not to hammer it on again, but like this industry is hard. And again, I always say this, it's solitary too. Like it's collaborative. We're always working with people, and yet it is a really lonely business. And so I so appreciate colleagues and people who will talk to students about this, because they know how hard it is. And I'm sure they want to share that with the students to let them know, like, this is really what it's like. And, it's not what you think, or like, what do you think it's going to be? Because this is really what it's like. But it just makes me so happy that these people who are working long hours, doing lots of stuff, are willing to take time and just jump in and help out. So that's just made me really happy this year. So opened a show. That was great people. Now connecting people to talk with students, just makes me happy. I'm just, people are good people, and I love seeing it. This next part might sound like a complaint, but it's really just an experience that's never quite happened to me. I mean, a lot of weird stuff. Every load in, every show, I always say something along the lines of, does it have to be this hard? Like, we're doing a show. Something always goes wrong that stresses us out when it doesn't need to stress us out. So I'm going back to remount a show in Phoenix, in Mesa, Arizona, that I did last year when I was at ASU. We're remounting it again, different venue, different set. The place we're renting has an inventory. So it has all this LED stuff. It has a really good inventory. I'm super happy with it. But as part of the inventory, there's 42 incandescent Lecos. So I use all the LED stuff first, all the moving heads. And then I still need some supplemental things, some really specific shutter cuts. And so I put in 14 Lecos, right? Now they have 42 in inventory, and they have plenty of dimmers. And so I'm like, 14, that's all I want to use. Like, we're going to rely on the LED stuff for everything else. So they're loading in today, and I get a call from the production electrician, who is Danny Dutchman, who we had on this show as part of our LDI 2023 episode on that panel. But anyway, I get a call, and Danny says, they don't have any lamps. So they have 42 Lecos in inventory that they tell people, and they don't have any lamps. So I'm sorting through it now, but it's just one of those things. Like, they got the rig up, like they did. The team is Danny, the production electrician, and then two students. One is the production electrician, one is the assistant lighting designer, and that's the crew. And they loaded in this plot, which is not crazy, but it's still, I think, 48 lights, which all include data and power. So it's not nothing, but they loaded it in one day. They did a killer job, and they get these Lecos up, but there's no lamps. So if you're listening and you don't know anything about lighting, you need a light bulb or a lamp to go into the light. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Otherwise, it's pointless. So I just think it's so funny that these are on inventory and there's no lamps in the building whatsoever. So we're sorting through it, but it's just one of those things of like, did it need to be this hard? So now we have to get the lamps in the next week, because as I said, I'm going on vacation. So we get back from vacation, and the next day I'm going to go down to Phoenix. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. But now we have to take time out of our load in. And of course, they're putting the set in, right? So then once we put the set in, we can't fly these electrics back in. So now we have to do it all from a lift, which just means you're taking what could be a half an hour task to lamp these 14 lights, and you're now turning it into, it could be a 3-hour thing working around the set to get up. Anyway, we have to get there to focus them. It's going to be fine. It's going to be great. But I'm just sharing these stories because I'm sure you have stories like this. I'm sure this sort of stuff has happened to you where it's just like, but that just not having lamps for the lights is just something that is so funny to me. Because the building, it's a newer building, but it's still been around for 2 years. So I would think surely somebody's been in there. Anyway, okay. All right. Well, thank you for just letting me talk all that through. All right. Now, the dad joke to end the episode has to do with narcissists and lighting. And so just so we're all caught up on that big word, a narcissist is somebody who has an excessive sense of self-importance and is preoccupied with their own needs and worth. Now, I just need you to know that for the joke, let that word not relate to any of our panel today. None of them are narcissists. And I like definitions because I don't always know these big words that I should know. All right. Anyway, here is the joke. How many narcissists does it take to change a light bulb? None. They use gaslighting. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.